Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio. Welcome to another star block tutorial. So this is our ongoing series where I'm making different stars and then hopefully figuring out a setting where I can put them all together into a children's quilt. And the block I've decided to do today is the Lemoyne star. Now this one I've made using the easy method, using half square triangles. And if you want to see a tutorial on how to do that method, put a comment in the comments below, because I'm not actually going to show that one today. The method I'm actually going to use today is the more traditional where you actually use diamonds. But we're not going to be doing an inset seam or a Y seam, which is traditionally how they were done. We're actually doing it as a slightly easier version, but it is using the diamond rather than the half square triangle method. So what I've got here, let me just show you actually. Let's just move, just placed all this. I've got this far so far on this block. So I've made the half block, and this is how I would do it. I make it in sort of 4 sections, and then I'm going to put them together in one block. And there's 2 things just to watch on this, is we need mirror image sections to make 1 unit, and then we put those together as a half, and then we're going to sew the whole block together. So together we're going to make this corner unit here. Now, if you've got a ruler that cuts 45-degree diamonds, you can use that. If you haven't got a specialist ruler, let me just move those out and out the way. You can cut a diamond just with your normal ruler, and I've got this little piece of fabric here, so I can show you how to do this. So we've got this is a 10-inch square. This is from my layer cake, and this is still my layer cake that I've been using for all my star blocks, and this range is called Soiree for Moda Fabrics. And as you can see here, I've made a number of star blocks already, and I've still got quite a bit of fabric left, and I've also got a little container with smaller pieces in as well. So this is definitely going on and on and on. So I'm really enjoying using this one. So I've picked out this particular fabric from here, and these diamonds are 3 inches. Let me just, before I do that, and the 3-inch measurement refers to sort of from this flat edge there to that flat edge there. So to get that, if you haven't got a 45-degree diamond ruler, and I'm just checking I've got the right side of this ruler to get my hole measurements. So I'm putting my 3-inch line on the edge of the fabric. I'm just going to move it in a little bit from those pinked edges. And I'm going to just take off a 3-inch strip, and then that piece of fabric will go back with the rest of my layer cake. And then I'm just going to trim off those little edges there. That's just little bits of fluff really. So that's my 3-inch piece. So to cut a diamond from this, I'm looking for the 45-degree line on my ruler, which is this one here. And I'm just going to line that up with the edge of the fabric, just making sure that it comes into the corner. And then we're just going to make a cut. And then once we've got that 45-degree line, we can just measure across 3 inches. And I'm measuring from this cut edge to here. And that would be my 3-inch diamond. I'll cut there. So that's how you would cut it from a strip, just using your normal ruler. So I'm just going to put those bits of fabric there. They'll go into my little scrap bits. Let's move that scrappy bit out of the way. And let's set that ruler aside. So that's our diamond cut, and I've got some others cut here that I'm using for this particular block. Then we need to cut, let me just pull this under, so that's those 2 pieces. We're then going to cut these, and these are half square triangles. Now there's a couple of methods you can use to do this. Now I use my trusty Creative Grids Flying Geese ruler, because I use this one anytime I need half square triangles or quarter square triangles. This is the ruler I grab. So you can sort of see from that I've cut. So for that one, that's a 4-inch strip, and I just went along and cut my half square triangles using this ruler, lining up the 4-inch strip measurement there. And you need 2 for each block, so a total of 8. If you haven't got a half square triangle ruler, you could just cut a 4-inch square and just cut it once across the diagonal. That works as well. And then for these 2 smaller triangles, so sorry, that the 4 inches were those 2 large ones. And then for these 2 smaller, You need to do the same again, but this is a 3-inch. So I would have used a 3-inch strip, used my half square triangle ruler, lining up the 3-inch and making half square triangles. Or alternatively, if you haven't got the half square triangle ruler, 3-inch square, cut once across the diagonal, and that will work. This is slightly oversized, so I think you can trim back a little bit on these. If you want them a little bit more oversized for a little bit more accuracy for when you're doing yours, you can up that to 3 1/4 and 4 1/4 inch squares, and you will have a little bit more to trim off then if you do that. So once we've got it like that, now I'm actually going to use that as my reference because each unit needs to look the same until we put it together. So I'm going to lay that out, and hopefully this is pretty well in shot so you can see. So this first one is mirroring that one there, and that one now is going to go like that. Because what we need to do is make sure that we put these white pieces on. Sorry, let me just, there's lots to show you. These white pieces on need to be mirror image. So if when you sort of go like that, they're actually facing in opposite directions. So I sort of make one unit and then I can use that. So that needs to go like that. That needs to go like that. Our small triangles go here, and I've got my reference there. That one goes there, and this is what I do. I lay it all out. And then this block, or this piece goes like that. So that's the edge we've cut, and that's the edge that's going to run along the centre seam. And then this piece, just checking for which is the front and which is the back, goes there. So I'm going to sew that together, and then I'm going to sew that together. So first I start with the small triangles. So I'm just going to lay that on here. Now, if you've cut these just from a square, you'll have sort of dog ears that stick out, and you need to be very careful ensuring that your 1/4 inch, you overlap by 1/4 inch, so everything lines up. So I'm just going to put a pin in that, and then I'm going to do the same with this one. And I'm going to put a pin in that one. And then we're going to take it to the machine and sew. But once I've sewn those, I'm going to come back and lay it back out just to double check that I've got everything in the right place. Now, the thing to watch here is all of these are bias edges. So we don't want to be doing a lot of unpicking. Hopefully we can sort of get this right to begin with. So let's take those to the sewing machine. Okay, so I've just started on my starter scrap because you know I like to do that. And then I'm just coming in here with my 1/4 inch seam, getting that pin out of the way. And I'm just going to double check that's still lined up where I want it. This is another case, definitely where pins are your friend. Like I say, I like to think I pin where I need to. Sometimes I don't pin where I need to, and it doesn't work. Now I'm just going to take those back to the mat and just make sure that I've still got everything in the right orientation. So here are our 2 pieces we've just sewn. And I've just got to remember which way. Now all the seams need to get pressed to the right. So if we press all the seams in the same direction, everything will lock nicely together. So that's the piece that goes there. Let's see if I can work this out. Yes, and that piece goes there. So I'm pressing that seam underneath the white, and that seam goes underneath the coloured fabric there. I'm not going to worry about that bit sticking out for the moment. So now we need to add these 2 pieces to the block. So the bit I'm going to line up is this end bit here. This is a bit easier for lining up because we've got a straight side. And I'm going to put my pin in there again. I'm actually going to put 2 pins in. Let's go crazy. Just so that I don't get it turned around. Quite often, the bit where it goes wrong is because you've taken it to the sewing machine and somehow in that journey, you've managed to swap things around. at home I have a little design board that I can sort of put everything on. Oh, that's a needle, that's not going to work. Now I am just going to trim that little dog ear off because that's going to get in the way of my sewing. And I'm just going to clip that off with my scissors. That side, we're okay. So we're going to take those to the machine and sew those two long edges. Okay, now I'm just going to check those seams again, take it back to the mat, check the seams again, and then just clip that one apart. Just make sure I've done everything. So I'm still pressing that seam to the right. So that's where that bit went. So in effect, we've made 2 half square triangle units to the right. Let's challenge then which way was to the right. And then you can see our block will go together like that. So this is the final seam we're going to do. Now you'll notice I haven't taken that to the iron yet, but that's okay. Now I'm just going to trim that little bit there because that will get in the way. Let's just double check that I haven't moved anything in the meantime. Now this, I start by nesting that seam there, and we've got seams going in opposite directions because we've pressed all the seams in the same direction. And I'm just going to put a pin there to hold that, and I will actually just pin the end of that block as well, just to hold everything together. So we're going to just do this final long seam. Now I'm just going to take that pin out because I like to still check that nothing has moved. So there's our unit, and we can see that matches that one. And if we bring move all the fluff out the way, if we bring our other 2 bits in, that's going to go there, so they're opposite, and that's going to go there, so they're opposite. So we're going to sew these 2 pieces together. Now the thing to watch here is we have to be really accurate with our sewing, which is why a lot of people use the half square triangle method rather than diamonds, because this is the tricky bit here now. And all of the sewing, you know, even just sort of sewing these 2 units together, accuracy is important to get that centre lined up. Now I'm just going to check that was on top. That seam I'm going to press to the right again, so everything's going to nest. So let me just line that back up again, just double check I'm happy, and then I'm going to lay these 2 blocks together. And we've got a match point here, which I'm going to pin. And then we've also got a match point right down here, which we're going to pin. And if we get that nice and accurate, that's going to help us when we come to set the 2 halves together. Just making sure. It's always a little bit tricky because these are hand cut. That's a wonky pin. Let's have something that's a bit straighter. I don't know why we put the wonky pins back, but we always do, don't we? Really, we should put them in a wonky pin area. So I'm just double checking. Now I'm going to start at this outer edge because it's a little bit bulky there in the centre. So you'll find it easier to start where there's less seams coming together. Now, having pinned, I'm going to take both of those out again because, as I said, I get a bit blasé if I've pinned and think, oh, it's, you know, nothing will move because I've pinned, and I find I concentrate a bit more, and I'm really making sure that that's exactly where I want it. So let's check and see how we did. Now I'm a little bit off there. Now let me just measure it because I might be able to make it work. yes, we've got 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to have to watch that point there when I come to sew these together. So we've got our 2 seams there. Now you might want to press that centre seam open. It does help to distribute the bulk a little bit, but we're going to hopefully swirl our seams. So I'm just going to make sure they all get pressed in the same direction. So that's going that way. So that's going to the right again. So that's our 2 halves. And this is where all the bulk is. So this is the bit that you might have the most. Sorry, I've got a funny throat here this morning. And line that one up. And it's important to get that centre right because it is very visible. And I don't always get it right first time, if I'm perfectly honest. So sometimes I have to unpick and try again, but that's allowed. But unpick carefully, because as I said, it's a bias edge. So I've pinned all the way along there. Now, just before I take it to the sewing machine, because this is such an important, I might show you on that side because you might be able to see it a bit more clearly. And if I've got a marking pen so I can... Now you can see where everything meets. I'm just going to put a little red dot there and put it under the close-up. So you can see all my threads are coming to that point right there. So that will be the absolute centre of the block. So when I sew, I need to make sure that I'm either slightly to that side or dead on that. If I go here, I'm going to have chopped off the points of my diamonds. So it might be easier actually if I sew it from that side because I can see where that seam is. Let me just move my pins quickly. So let's give this a go. So this is now the point I'm watching for. So you can see my little red dot, or just see the little red dot there under the fabric. But I'm also just making sure that everything is where I want it to be. And it's a little bit tricky and it's a little bit bulky. So this is a little bit hit and hope. I'm just going to use my... And I can just see. No, I could see I had a seam that was a little bit off there, so hopefully we've caught everything. So let's see how we did. Okay, so we've had a look and you can see I'm just a little bit off on that. I've cut off the tip on that one and it has just travelled probably by about 1/8 inch. Now, I've got lots of options here. I can actually either unpick a little bit of that seam and try and do that again. But actually, this is quite a large block. It's quite a busy fabric. So what I may do for the moment is leave it, wait until I lay all my blocks out in my quilt and see how obvious it is to me from a quilt. Now, it's always very obvious when we're making these things because we're right on top of it when we're sewing. But once we make things, we're generally never that close to it again. So I may just leave that for now and just make a decision a bit further down the road as to whether or not that's bothering me and how obvious it is. However, it's a good learning point or learning opportunity because there are a couple of things that I could have done to help avoid that. Now, what often happens is when we travel and do a whole long seam is the fabric's being pushed along by our sewing machine. So what I could have done is started in the centre and sewn out in that direction and started in the centre and sewn out in that direction. And that helps to keep your centre absolutely in place and it stops your fabric from moving. So I could have done that. The other thing you can do is you can get a pin and actually where those seams need to join, you can push your pin right through all of those and you can see it's off because the pin's not coming out where it should. but right where it should on both sides of the fabric. Now what I do then is leave that pin there exactly like that because it's holding it precisely in place. Then what I would do is get a pin and pin that side and get another pin and pin that side. And I leave all of those 3 pins in, pin the rest, and then I would sew. And as I approach that pin, take that pin out and only remove that when I'm actually at that point ready to sew it. And that also helps to keep everything in alignment. So there's a couple of options I could have done there to help myself get a better point. But as I say, for the moment, I'm not going to worry about it. We're going to take this block, give it a press, and like I say, I'm going to make my decision about whether or not I'm going to alter that or leave it a bit later on. Now, when you come to press this final seam, you may want to press it to one side, or you may want to press it open. But because we've got our seams all going in sort of a anti-clockwise direction, if we open that seam up, sometimes we can sort of get that to sort of swirl in the centre. And then that's going to lay flat. We're just going to make sure. But because we pressed all our seams in the same direction, every bit of this does actually lock together. I may not be too worried about that centre, you know. I'm looking at it. Jury's out on that one. Anyway, there's the block. Now this is the reason why a lot of people do the half square triangle method, because it's a lot easier because you're making a pinwheel there. You don't have the same issue with everything coming to the same point in the centre. So let me just put that in under the close-up again so you can just see how I'm just a little bit off there. But it may be close enough that I go, do you know what, I'm not going to worry about that. Now that, I would then do a final trim to get it to the block size. Now this will be a 12-inch finish, so trim down to 12.5. And I don't do any of the trimming on any of these units, even if I've oversized these triangles, until the whole block's together, and then trim it down. But just make sure that you keep at least 1/4 inch from your star points so that you don't. Now if you haven't, it's not the end of the world. Losing a little bit of a tip of a triangle is not the end of the world. So do the best you can, basically. So that's the Lemoyne star, a little bit more of a sort of an intermediate or sort of a more sort of an advanced method of making it, just because of how the accuracy that you need to make the block. And like I say, every unit has to be really accurate for your centre to come together nicely. That's not too bad, so I'm sort of okay with that, actually. This is the smaller version. Now, I should also say, actually, why I've made the 12-inch version, because I was thinking with my star blocks, most of my other blocks are either 8-inch, which is the size of this one, or 6-inch, which are the size of the Friendship Star and the Ohio stars that we've done. I think this one and the Sawtooth Star, I've made it 8 inches, because they're all sizes that I can work with and get it to piece together. This one I've made at 12 inches because I've decided that I want a focal star, a focal point on the quilt, with a larger star, so I'm thinking that this is going to be that star for that. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I hope there was a few sort of tips and techniques there. I hope you give this method a go. I say it's not for the faint-hearted, but you know, try it, and it's like anything. The more you do, the better at it you become, and you learn from your mistakes as well. But I'm sort of quite happy with that, so that's not too bad. So thank you for joining me today. If you do give any of these a go, please share any photos with us on social media. Also in the comments, you know, if you've got any tips or tricks of what you find works or doesn't work when you're making these blocks, please share them. Not just for us, but for other people that may read the comments, they may learn from that as well. So thank you once again. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll join me again here next time in the sewing studio.